Am I the asshole for getting upset after my husband pranked me by yelling fire, even though he knew about my past trauma? Original post, July 29, 2024, recovered. So me and my husband have been married for 5 years. We are currently F24 and M33. Way before we met, when I was 16, my mom's house had a house fire that burnt literally everything down, and sadly my childhood cat was also killed in it. I remember my mom and brother waking me up screaming, "Fire, fire, get up, get up." We crawled out under the smoke, and luckily my neighbors had already called the fire department and they pulled us out. We lost literally everything. We were devastated. So that was a while ago, but it still really scares me, and I check outlets and our stove and candles and everything all the time. My husband knows this about me. So 2 nights ago I went to bed early because I am currently 34 weeks pregnant, literally about to pop. I was sleeping for a while before, for some reason, my husband decided to wake me up by yelling, "Baby, there's a fire, 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 get up." As quick as I could get up at 34 weeks, I did, and grabbed my purse. I was just in automatic shock and just autopilot and knew I needed what to grab. I made it all the way down the stairs, yelling for my husband to follow me, before he started laughing and telling me it was a joke. It took a minute for that to process. I stood there with an open mouth while he laughed and ushered me down the rest of the stairs. I sat down on the couch and just started sobbing. It was genuinely the hardest I've ever sobbed. It's like I couldn't get myself to stop and my whole body was shaking. My heart was racing and I couldn't breathe. I have never had this experience before. I was genuinely so panicked. I was so fucking upset. My husband apologized and was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, it was just a joke." I just cried until he eventually was like, "What the fuck, it was just a prank, this is really dramatic." After a few hours, I calmed myself down and went to apologize to him. He wouldn't take it. He said I was being overdramatic and made him feel like shit for a harmless prank. So I guess AITA. I've never been good at taking jokes. I've been trying to be less sensitive, but IDK are relevant. Comment: why did you apologize? OP, downvoted. I apologized because he made a big deal about me making him feel horrible. There is no consensus bot on AITA, but comments were NTA update post, September 1st, 2024, a bit over a month later. A month ago I posted my first post, which is still up on my account. I was terrified and hurt and confused, and the comments really helped me sort through everything going on. A week later, I went into preterm labor and gave birth to my baby at 35 weeks. A week after that, my husband beat me unconscious when he caught me Googling the signs of an abusive marriage, after he coerced me into sex a week postpartum. Today I filed for divorce and secured a restraining order on him. My husband will never lay a hand on me or my baby ever again. I cannot confidently say that I would have made that decision without the help of my original post. So thank you so very much. I think maybe people do not realize how much you can help a stranger on the internet, but you can. And all of you did. I will be the woman who leaves after the first time. I will be the best mother I can be, and that starts with leaving him. Thank you. Now to the next story, story 2. To start with, I am honestly grateful that my daughter, Tara, has a great relationship with her stepmother, Danny. To give some context, my husband Mark and I did not have a good relationship. We fell in love quite young and got married because we thought that was the right thing to do. I got pregnant with Tara, and although Mark tried to be a good father, he was also extremely lazy. He never helped me with Tara in any way. I was the one who fed her, changed her diapers, stayed awake the whole night until she could sleep, bathed her, and took her for walks. Mark was the fun parent who would just come home and spend an hour with the baby. During that 1 hour, I would be cooking his meals or cleaning up the kitchen. Mark would then have his dinner and go into his den to play video games. If I ever asked him to help me around the house or with Tara, he would tell me that this was a woman's job and that was how God intended it. This would lead to us having disagreements, where I would plead with him to help me out because I was too exhausted, but he would refuse point blank. One time, I was too sick to even move around, so I asked him to please look after Tara so I could take some rest and recover. He started an argument with me, calling me lazy and saying how his mother never asked his father for help. It really angered me because he was as much Tara's parent as I was, yet he never lifted a finger. I yelled at him that if he didn't help out, I would pack my bags and leave him. This rattled him a bit, so he grumbled but eventually took a leave of absence to take care of Tara so I could sleep for a few hours. As my maternity leave was coming to an end, I asked my mother if she could babysit Tara during my working hours, and she graciously accepted. Mark's mother never even offered to help, but I was fine with it. Mark didn't like that I was going back to work since he had been trying to get me to be a stay-at-home wife for a long time, but I always refused. Looking back, I am thankful that I never left my job, since Mark lost his job when his company downsized. This was a shock to him as well as the other employees who were let go. When he told me, I wanted to panic too because we needed the money for household expenses and taking care of Tara. However, I knew if I panicked, he would get even more anxious, so I assured him that I would bear all the expenses around the house until he could get back on his feet. Since he did not have a job, I asked him to look after Tara so my mother could get a break from the babysitting duties. At first, Mark didn't want to, but eventually, he agreed. Every day, I would come back home to find Mark sitting in the same spot on the sofa, playing video games with Tara playing on the floor nearby. Basic needs like meals and baths were neglected, and I often returned home to find Tara hungry and unkempt. This would obviously make me angry because, on one hand, I had no choice but to work hard to single-handedly support my family, and on the other hand, I felt guilty that my daughter was being neglected. I remember that during this time, we would fight a lot more, with Mark saying how he was trying to find a job, yet he never went for any interviews. 6 months after spending his days at home, Mark told me he wanted to take up a business course. He had always wanted to start a business, but I just didn't think it was the right time, as I wanted him to find a stable job for the time being. However, he had apparently already discussed it with his parents, who were ready to pay for his college fees. I was the last one he informed, as if I meant nothing to him as a partner. I think this should have been my time to leave, but like a fool who refuses to quit, I stayed. While I worked and looked after Tara, Mark went back to study. Eventually, he graduated and started his own business. It was doing well, so he started hiring people under him. This is how Danny came into his life. She was this young, perky girl straight out of college and was hired to be his personal assistant. Danny and Mark would spend hours together, but I never thought anything of it. The thought of him cheating never even crossed my mind. However, Mark started introducing Tara to Danny every time he took her to his office and insisted on Tara and Danny spending time together. This made me a bit suspicious. I asked Mark outright if there was something between him and her, but he denied vehemently, telling me that I was overthinking. I dropped it until one of my friends called me one day and told me she saw Danny and Mark sitting in a cafe holding hands. She had no idea who Danny was, but from her description of the woman sitting with Mark, I knew it had to be Danny. I was not only embarrassed that my husband was cheating, but I also knew that everyone would now find out about it. That evening, I insisted on Mark inviting Danny for dinner, telling him how I should know her since she worked for him. He had no idea that I now had proof of his discretions. During dinner, I told him directly that I was done with them sneaking behind my back and that I knew everything. Mark froze, and Danny went pale as a sheet. I told her that I didn't care if she was sleeping with my husband because, at this point, no one could save our marriage. Danny and Mark looked at each other, and she finally confessed that she was in love with Mark. She went on to say that she didn't mean for this to happen and that she was sorry for everything. However, Mark asked me why I had invited Danny if I already knew everything, and he started telling me how I had no right to embarrass them. He told me how he was not going to sit there and apologize since I was the one who had failed at our marriage first. I scoffed as he went on to blame me, saying how I should have tried to keep him satisfied, but I never did because I was always too busy trying to be independent. I shook my head and reminded him how my work put food on the table while he was jobless and when he was off going to study. Mark argued that I could have left my job after his business was doing well, but I told him that I couldn't take any chances and that we both needed to have jobs to bring in the income necessary for our future. I was so pissed at this man for trying to weasel his way out of this fiasco that I went on to tell him how I had never neglected him or Tara and always did all the house chores regardless of my job, so he had no right to blame me. He kept trying to blame me, but I ignored him. I looked at Danny and mouthed good luck, before excusing myself from the table. I knew exactly what I had to do now. In some way, Mark was freed from the burden of finding an excuse to divorce him. Yes, I used to be in love with him at one point, but since Tara, we had just become roommates living in the same house. I was the one doing the bulk of the work around the house anyway, so I had nothing to lose by leaving him. I packed my bags along with Tara's, while Mark kept asking what I was doing. I informed him that I was leaving and would be sending him divorce papers soon. He tried to argue, saying that I was being too cold and that we should take a beat to think about it, but I didn't think there was anything left to think about anymore. I simply had enough and went to stay with my parents for the time being. If you're wondering if his parents ever reached out to me and comforted me, then you're wrong. They never said anything to my ex for breaking up the family. It was only later that I found out the reason why. You see, Danny was not just young. She also came from a wealthy family, and by marrying her, Mark would be securing his money back. Honestly, I did not care about all that. My goal was simply to ensure that Mark and I could be good co-parents for the sake of Tara. From my first impression, Danny didn't seem like a bad person, so I hoped that she could be a good step-parent for my daughter as well. During the divorce, I took half of my husband's assets, which was a lot since his business was making six figures. I bought a place for myself and Tara to live in. Mark and I had shared custody, so while I got Tara from Monday to Friday, he got her from Friday evening until Monday morning, when he would drop her off at school. After our divorce, he immediately let Danny move in with him. Tara would come back home and tell me how Danny and Mark would take her to expensive restaurants for dinner or to amusement parks. She would always be really excited to meet them during the weekend. In the beginning, I didn't notice anything. However, my daughter started detaching herself from me more and more. I was the parent who made her finish her homework or taught her to do chores around the house, just basic things like washing her own dishes or folding her laundry, and she didn't like that. I was the one who made her eat healthy food and refused to order from McDonald's every day. She would always insist on me buying her expensive gifts, which I didn't think were appropriate for a kid. Mark, on the other hand, was the fun parent who took her everywhere, and she would spend her weekends doing absolutely nothing except watching TV or eating good food. She would often tell me how chill they were, and if I didn't listen to her, she would say hurtful things like she wished she lived with them only. This would break my heart, but she was a kid, so I would let it slide. When Tara was 12, Danny got pregnant with twins. Tara was really anxious during this time and would constantly ask me if Mark would still love her. I had to reassure her that her father would love her no matter what. Her anxiety got so bad that I had to talk to Mark about it. In the end, he did talk to Tara and reassured her that nothing would change between them. However, Tara informed him that she wanted to spend more time with him, and he agreed. Hence, she started going to his place on Wednesday evenings instead of Fridays. Tara had her own room in the house until then, but since the twins were coming, Mark told her that they would renovate the basement for her while her bedroom would turn into the twins' room. Tara agreed. This all happened without my knowledge because at this point, my daughter was hardly communicating with me. She was so focused on being a part of Mark's family that she would hardly tell me anything going on in her life. After the twins were born, Mark informed me that for the next 2 months, Danny didn't want Tara to come over since she wanted to take care of the babies and give her 100% attention to them. I yelled at him that this would seriously hurt his daughter and make her question if he even loved her, but he argued back that he needed to be there for Danny and the twins and they were his first priority. When I broke the news to Tara, she started to cry and kept asking why Danny didn't want her anymore. I did my best to reassure her as much as I could. After a month, when Mark came to pick her up, Tara was beside herself with joy. She later told me how adorable the twins were and how beautiful her room was in the basement. After seeing the pictures of her new room, I did agree that it was pretty. Even though it irked me a bit that she had agreed to give up her room. After seeing the pictures of her new room, I did agree that it was pretty, even though it irked me a bit that she had agreed to give up her bedroom for the twins. However, if my daughter was happy, then I was happy too. As days went on, Tara would find excuses to spend more and more days with her father. She would tell me how she loved babysitting the twins since Danny sometimes needed a break. This really pissed me off, so I forbade Mark from using his daughter as a stand-in babysitter. He argued that this was how children bond, but I told him that his children could bond without Tara changing their diapers and feeding them with a bottle, which was not a job for a teenager. After some back and forth, he agreed. However, Tara yelled at me when she found out. She told me that Danny had informed her that I had complained to Mark about it. Tara said she wanted to do this for the twins, but I knew my daughter was desperately trying to fit in or be loved by Mark and Danny by doing whatever they wanted. I assured her that I had no ill intentions and that I wanted her to enjoy her teenage years. What Mark and Danny were doing was basically parentifying her, but she didn't care. This was the start of Tara always choosing Danny over me. I never disliked Danny, but it would hurt every time my own daughter compared me to her stepmother in every way. Teenagers can be harsh, and Tara was no different. She also started getting meaner and nastier towards me. For example, I remember once after work, I came home and was sitting watching TV while eating ice cream. When Tara came out of her room, she commented on how I was becoming a fat cow. It really took me by surprise, especially since I wasn't even fat. When I asked her why she said such a thing, Tara told me that Danny had taught her gluten makes people fat and that she wasn't allowed to eat gluten at Mark and Danny's place. I informed her that while that might be true for some, gluten is not inherently bad, and she had no right to body shame someone just because she didn't prefer eating it. As more days passed, Tara became an entirely different person. In every other conversation, she would bring up how Danny did this or that, and it essentially felt like she was turning into a mini Danny herself. She would refuse to go anywhere with me when the sun was out, telling me she didn't want to become tan. She insisted on skipping breakfast so she could lose a few extra pounds to fit into a bikini that Danny had bought one size smaller. She weighed herself every day and noted her weight in a diary. She would tell me how Danny had told her she had the potential to take part in beauty pageants if she stuck to this routine. I was so pissed when I found out about this. Up until that point, I had never had a conversation with Danny, but I decided enough was enough and finally reached out to her. However, Danny didn't see any issues with my daughter's behavior. She told me how she had simply suggested that Tara take part in a beauty pageant and that it wasn't her fault if Tara had taken it to heart. I pointed out to her how Tara clearly saw her as a second parent, so she should be more careful with her words. Danny responded that I should push my daughter to be the best version of herself instead of trying to bring her down. I was really taken aback by her words and asked her to keep her weird ideologies to herself. Later, Mark called to yell at me about how I shouldn't talk to his wife that way. When I informed him of everything, he told me that he agreed with Danny and that Tara shouldn't take Danny's advice or suggestions to such an extreme. I yelled back at him to open his eyes because clearly, Tara was being influenced, but my ex-husband didn't care enough. I did try to talk with Tara and tell her how she should enjoy her teenage years as much as she could without worrying about trivial things like weight and getting tanned, but Tara remained steadfast in her resolve. She began closing herself off from me, shutting down any attempts at open communication. It was a heartbreaking realization, watching my daughter slip further away with each passing day. She also stopped coming to me for any decisions or general life situations. For example, if her school was taking her on a trip, she would wait to visit her father so he could sign the form for her, even though I never had any problem with her going. It was as if she didn't see any real importance in me being part of her life. I found myself relegated to the sidelines, a mere spectator in her life. As a result, I became quite depressed, but during this time, I met a man who changed everything in my life. Henry and I met when I was at the lowest point. When we started dating, he saw how much Tara's behavior was affecting me and reassured me that every teenager goes through a rebellious phase. However, things just got worse and worse. Tara and I would get into constant fights, either about her falling grades or not submitting her assignments on time. This is when Tara started blaming me for everything. She would also constantly comment on how she understood why Mark left me for Danny. This was a sore topic for me, and it broke my heart every time she said it. I hate to admit it, but I started to pull away from my daughter bit by bit. When Tara turned 18 and it was time for her to go to college, she and Mark came to me to discuss something important. I thought it was about the college fees, and I was ready to tell Mark that I would pay half of her tuition. But instead, Mark informed me that Tara wanted me to give up my parental rights. I sat there, shocked, as Tara told me she had been thinking about this for a long time and wanted Danny to officially adopt her. I was so taken aback that, at first, I thought it was just a bad dream. Tara pleaded with me, saying she loved Danny more than me and wanted her to be her real mommy. I asked her to explain her reasons, hoping to dissuade her, but Tara spoke earnestly about how she felt a stronger bond with Danny and admired her stepmother's qualities and accomplishments. She also expressed that by becoming Danny's legal child, she would be part of her inheritance, something Danny's parents had promised her. As Tara poured her heart out, I struggled to contain my emotions. It felt like my world was crumbling, as though everything I had worked so hard for was slipping through my fingers. The realization that my daughter no longer saw me as her mother was a devastating blow, one that left me reeling with a profound sense of loss. Tara continued to plead, saying she had always seen Danny as her real mother, and I shouldn't fight this. Mark chimed in, agreeing with Tara and telling me I shouldn't take it personally and should respect her wishes. For the next few weeks, I had a tough decision to make. Despite the pain coursing through me, I knew I had to consider Tara's wishes. I couldn't force her to maintain a relationship she no longer desired, nor could I deny her the opportunity to seek happiness on her own terms. My parents tried to talk to Tara, but she refused to take their calls. In the days that followed, I grappled with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I mourned the loss of the bond I had once shared with Tara, grieving for the daughter I had known. But amidst the sorrow, I also felt a sense of resignation, a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. I would constantly cry in front of Henry, who was the only one by my side. Even he felt what Tara was doing was unbelievably cruel. With a heavy heart, I reluctantly agreed to Tara's request, knowing it marked the end of a chapter in both our lives. I won't get into the legal details, but it took a couple of weeks. In the end, Tara and I were legally separated, and Danny proceeded with the adoption process. After that, Tara basically stopped talking to me. I can't even begin to describe how painful those days were for me. I had lived for my daughter, But watching her drift away from my life was excruciating. I have to admit, Henry was the one who kept me going. He never left my side, encouraged me to go to therapy, and moved in with me to take care of me. I even left my job, and Henry supported me completely. I was diagnosed with depression and started taking medication. Watching Henry rally behind me gave me a new reason to stay alive. Slowly but surely, I started to heal and stopped blaming myself for everything. Henry encouraged me to join his business just to keep myself busy, and I agreed. Henry was the partner I never had but truly deserved. I poured myself into my work and my relationship with Henry, finding joy in the simple pleasures life had to offer. For the last 6 years, I have worked with Henry to build his business, and he has made me an equal partner, giving me a seat at the table. We respect each other professionally as well as personally. We got married and built a good life for ourselves. Never in my wildest dreams did I think Tara, who hadn't even called me once over the last few years, would reach out to me out of the blue yesterday. Her unexpected call caught me off guard, stirring up a whirlwind of emotions I thought I had buried deep within. She asked me about my life and informed me about hers. I didn't know why she was calling, but I was glad that she remembered me after all this time. At the end of the day, regardless of what any legal papers say, she is still my daughter, and I will always continue to love her, no matter how much she hurt me. I thought she had matured and wanted to rekindle a relationship with me. However, the conversation shifted to her upcoming wedding. I was surprised to learn that my baby girl was now getting married, and I couldn't contain my emotions. Tara then informed me that the reason she had called was because she wanted me to contribute to her wedding expenses. I was taken aback as she went on to tell me how Mark didn't have much money to offer since his business had been affected during COVID and never really recovered, and how Danny had refused to help much with the wedding because she wanted to save money for her twins. Tara went on to tell me how she knew I was doing well now that I was married to Henry, as she would occasionally stalk me on social media. She wanted me to pay for her wedding since she felt I owed her. All my emotions of joy and excitement quickly turned to shock and disbelief. I could not believe what Tara was saying. She was acting extremely entitled, despite having been the one to leave me behind. I politely told her that while I was happy she wanted to reconnect, I wasn't going to simply forgive and forget everything that had happened in the past. I reminded her how she had wanted me to give up my parental rights so Danny could adopt her, and how she had considered Danny to be her real mother, so I didn't see why she needed my help now. Tara argued that I was still her biological mother and said it wasn't fair that I had so much money now. She insisted that giving her a few $1,000s for the wedding wouldn't be a big deal. I made it clear to her that while I wished her happiness, I couldn't just write a blank check for her wedding. She got angry and called me a few unpleasant names, blaming me for abandoning her and saying I didn't fight for her enough all those years ago. It felt like she was grasping at straws, trying to justify her actions, and the conversation wasn't going anywhere. She angrily disconnected the call. Now, I'm left wondering if I should have just helped my daughter out for her wedding, which I could easily afford. AITA for not helping my daughter. Update 1. I never expected this post to blow up so quickly. In a matter of days, I've had hundreds of strangers on Reddit telling me that I shouldn't under any circumstances concede to my daughter's demands. When I posted this, I was feeling guilty because she is, after all, my daughter. But seeing all your comments about how she is basically using me has made me question my own judgments. It's very difficult as a parent to stop loving your child, even if they don't want you anymore. Tara will always be my baby, but I have to accept that she is no longer a child and has turned into an entitled adult. Mark and Danny haven't reached out to me, so I guess they have no idea that Tara is asking me for financial assistance. I won't be helping her, and I've also had a conversation with Henry about it. Update 2, I sent a message to Tara, just like some of you suggested. Dear Tara, I want to express how much I appreciate you reaching out to me and sharing updates about your life. It meant a lot to hear from you, and I'm glad to know that you're doing well. Regarding your request for financial assistance with your wedding, I want to be transparent about where I stand. While I understand your desire for support during this important time, I must respectfully decline your request. Since you never wanted me to be part of your life, I believe it's best for us to maintain the current distance between us. It's important for me to prioritize my own well-being and boundaries. I want nothing but the best for you as you embark on this new chapter, and I hope you can understand and respect my perspective. I sent this message to her this morning, and I will update if she replies. Update 3. So, it turns out she did see my message but has left me on read. I guess the majority of you were right, she never really cared and just wanted me to pay for her wedding without any questions. Henry is not happy with how Tara has treated me and has asked me to block her so she can't contact me further with any unwarranted requests. Up until this moment I was conflicted, but now I will do so. For those of you who were worried about my will, don't be. Even though Henry and I don't have children, he has nephews and nieces, so we will mostly be leaving everything to them. I appreciate all the support and advice I've received from the Reddit community. Moving forward, I will focus on my own well-being and continue to cherish the loving relationship I have with my husband.